All right. It's a good first fireside there, good first panel. Give it up for our next guests. We've got Hunter and Matt. There we go. Oh, yeah. We're in Miami. Haven't had coffee all year, but I had a Cuban coffee this morning because we're in Miami. Hunter's got his coffee right here with us. Guys, I'm excited for this one. We've had both of you guys on the Roll-Up Show talking about things from all spectrums, assets, agents, and the like. Why don't we start by talking about how agents and assets are coming together? You know, Nir obviously representing the agent side of things, Bitwise representing the assets. Why don't we start broad? How do you foresee the most critical infrastructure becoming agentic? How do you foresee the billions of dollars at Bitwise becoming agentic, and then we'll approach it from the agent side as well?
It's awesome to be with all of you, and thank you to Nir for such a fantastic event and space. Maybe I'll share an anecdote that's not my anecdote, but I heard at a dinner last night from somebody I was with. He's been tinkering with OpenClaw, which he's running on his mobile device, and he was curious to see what it could do. So he asked it to create a wallet. Created a wallet. He asked to share the address. He sent it some stablecoins, and then he asked it a pretty open-ended thing. He said, "How can you make me money?" And it came back with a list of something like 18 dexes and a certain number of vaults and the prediction markets it could trade. And he said, "Go find a way to make me money on prediction markets." And it made him a few $100s. I think that might be the type of anecdote that is how agents start to creep into the stories and experiences of investors, which is if public blockchains like Near, if applications being built on top, wallets, are programmatically interfaceable or usable by other software, and then if that intersects with people being curious about deploying their agents against opportunities, I think it can happen very fast. And I would say that in general, I think much of DeFi and Layer 1s and Near are already interoperable with software. And if the sort of idea occurs to more and more people, I think, you know, when you hear a story like the one I just shared, or when you try it yourself, it doesn't have to be a 6-month journey. You just kind of have to have the thought, and you kind of have to be in a position of comfort with an agent already to go get it to do things for you. But it can do many of the things that an individual can do in DeFi. So I think that may end up being the inroad versus more sort of enterprise scale integrations or things of that sort.
And Matt, do you see it similarly in the sense that as we move capital on-chain, agentic, not just on-chain, but we move it into an agentic form of on-chain commerce, do you see this happening more kind of grassroots, people taking it into their own hands, they deploy an agent, they say, "Hey, go make me some money"? Or do you see this more maybe at the enterprise level?
I think Hunter's story, the lesson to take out of that, blockchains are awful from a UI, UX point of view. They are terrible to work with. And you know, we've been in this world for a long time. We've been become comfortable with it. I keep having a desire to go and like weigh the crypto steals that I have in the safe in the basement, just to see like how much like weight is there, because it's like that's kind of the anchor that you're dragging around using these things. So to Hunter's story, like that's fantastic. I don't have to touch the blockchain. I don't have to like get my hands on it, and the agent can do that. Like that to me is the beautiful, exciting thing, is that the agent becomes the UI. That's what I interact with. And from a blockchain point of view, I don't have to make it pretty. I have to make it usable, accessible, machine readable, machine accessible. That's much easier to do from the blockchain point of view. And so we start to take that kind of middleware thing, that problem and challenge that we've had for years now, that is retarding our development and our adoption. Like that's a fantastic way of solving that. On the enterprise side, I don't know. getting into like assets on chain and stuff, I don't know like where the institutions are there. I think if we look at what's really happening, the people that are adopting like tokenized equities, it's not the institutions. It's people that don't have access to those assets, right? Institutions already have access to those assets. It's really easy for many of the people in this room. Like we have access to those things in brokerage accounts. So it's really for the non-US market that doesn't have access to that. We're like, that's where we're getting traction and capability. And in that case, like you're willing to go through the pain because you want access to the markets, you want access to the US markets. And so you're willing to push through that pain and figure out how to do that, in the world of a blockchain. Maybe the agent, when they have the agent there for those folks, it'll become even easier and you'll see adoption accelerate.
Yeah. And so we're seeing the tokenization super cycle. We're seeing this agentic super cycle, values moving on chain, where it's moving into an agentic world. And so, that is at every single level of the stack, UI, UX, deeper. We've been taking more of an asset-centric view from some of the people that we've spoken to at the roll-up. Let's just start with the UI layer. When it comes to equities, people go to their broker, they execute trades there. Traditionally on chain, it's been a wallet. If everything becomes, hey, call up my agent, or text my agent, like the compression of that entire UI layer feels like it goes away.
It's kind of a miracle, right? I mean, for how many years have people in this room have been in crypto? Have people said the UI needs to get better, or we need to think about making it easier for people to interact with the space? Well, then, the miracle is that LLMs and agents show up and they say, actually, you can go ahead and skip the GUI and go straight to a verbal interface. And I think that may, as I say, sort of be a miracle for crypto, which is really focused on infrastructure, capabilities, programmability, and maybe able to just jump over having to sort of rebuild interfaces like Robinhood and other fantastic but difficult consumer interfaces and just plug right into the sort of the next generation Google search.
And so a conversation that we've had for a long time in digital assets has been fat application thesis or fat protocol thesis. There's a whole long-winded story that goes on into this approach. We've sort of debunked both of those, and we've called if you get close to the customers, you have distribution, then the moat goes to you. And we've called that the fat wallet thesis because typically they've been the closest to the customer. But now they're collapsing too. Fat wallet thesis also, and we all love fat wallets.
Nobody's going to be fat.
Everyone's thin. So where does value accrue? Where's the moat? When all of this compresses, does it all just accrue to these model companies that have the agentic interface? Or where does value accrue in this open agentic stack? It feels like it could be the asset-centric layer, but I'm curious to hear your take on this.
Robbie, I think you're right with the fat wallet thesis. Like if you abstract that out, it's whoever's closest to the end user. Mm-hmm. That's where it happens. And we saw that with intents. If you look at the framework for near intents, it was kind of a funny thing to start peeling back as I joined Near and realize, okay, we have a first party app, Near.com. You can go and you can connect almost any wallet in there. You can move assets. Everyone in this room should go play with it. It's fantastic. We don't have the majority of the usage is not happening through that. So the next thing is we have connection to wallet. So now we've gone from direct to consumer to B to B to C, right? We're the first B. The second B is the wallet, and then you hit the consumer. And that's another small fraction. The biggest chunk of what we're actually doing there is B to B to B to C. And so every time, so it's us, we're the first B. The second B is a partner that is doing aggregation and bringing flows together, and they have the relationship with the wallet, and the wallet has the relationship with the consumer. And so what you see is that the further you are away from that endpoint, the further you're away from having that relationship with the end user, the more intermediated you are, the less of the sort of economic rents that you take out of that.
Right. So for follow-up there is, for so long we've had this barbell thesis. People really like this idea. It kind of flows to the extremes, and then you have the messy middle. But it sounds like everyone in that value pipeline is able to, provide a valuable service. Do you think that there's a messy middle in the B to B to B to B to B to C pipeline?
I mean, I don't know that they're necessarily adding value. They just happen to have those relationships, and so I think that collapses. I think whether just through economic pressures or if it's some sort of technological innovation, I think we will see that collapse. It's very interesting to me to watch where the economics start to collect as you look through and watch the transactions. The issuer, Ondo, makes money on the way in and the way out. The person that's making the most money in this world is the person that's there facilitating the trades and taking a vig on every trade. Like, that's where the accumulation is happening. It's very strange to watch the numbers. I was at the Ondo Summit in January, and the president, Ian DeBode, stood up there and he was talking about some of the metrics. And these were shocking to me. At that point, so they had launched global markets in September. It was now January, so 5 months-ish. They had $550 million of tokenized equities. And I was like, okay, no big deal. Who really cares? The trading, they traded $9 billion. So that $550 million should turn over 18 times in 5 months. And so there's a VIG, there's a rent that's happening every time that asset is turning. Compare that to what happens in the US markets. We have about $100 trillion of US equities. They trade about $100 trillion a year. So the US equity market turns over once. And this sort of online world where we're not really investing, we're speculating, we're gambling, and we're moving in and out of assets a lot. Like, there's those like spots where you can find that the economics accumulate in the kind of trading part of that world today.
And Hunter, from your side, given the ETF landscape and kind of the traditional investor mindset maybe doesn't turn over as much, how are you approaching what this, more online native, on-chain native, investor trader is doing with these funds and these assets?
So Bitwise does a number of things today. Generally, we serve investors and try to help them do what they want to do. We have ETFs. We have an alpha part of the business. We provide validation services, including validators for Near. We do vault curation, and we just announced our first tokenized fund today.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Very, very excited about that. It sort of depends. We have clients who want to get exposure to Near because they think that value will accrue at the settlement and L1 layer. And then we have clients who just want to run strategies through vaults, for instance. So those are some of the ways, and then of course the tokenization, you can play a role in some of that. So those are the ways that we interact with clients today. Yeah.
But hang on, just like the beauty of what you did is an analogy of what we're seeing on that agent side, right? You abstracted away all the complexity of the crypto markets and brought that exposure to people. So I could have it in the same pane of glass where I'm trading my equities or I'm trading my bonds. Like, that was that is a huge piece of value that you provided to folks, because you were never going to get the trader to open up a second screen, to go into Coinbase and buy those assets themselves. It's so much easier just to have BITW in there and be able to see that in my portfolio and move through that.
Yeah. I think one other thing on the economic models is, I think that a good base case in thinking about anything in crypto is to think about the context of tech in general or financial services in general. And the likely probability is that there won't be a fat part. There will be thin parts, and that things will need scale, which is the case of most financial services. And I think that that's sort of a transition the industry is going through at the moment, where when things were very new, competition was very thin, people could have very large take rates and very large monetization engines, but I think it's getting thinner, and so people need more scale, and that's a little bit of the tension of the moment. But I think it probably settles in a place where it's not just one pocket of the value chain that's really soaking up all of the monetization.
That feels unique to what we hear when we think about the power law and some of these, as these companies scales. Typically, I've heard it's 4 to 2 to 1 when you have kind of these early markets that end up reaching some critical mass. Usually, a market leader, 40, maybe 60% of the market, second 25%. But it sounds like you're thinking that this will over time get more distributed.
I think it depends on what part of the industry or value chain or supply chain we're talking about. I think over time fees will just become lower across everything in crypto, and that's one of the beautiful things about financial services that's different than some other businesses. There are other businesses that really can capture and extract an extreme amount of value. That's great for shareholders, less great for customers. I think that the open source nature of crypto, the interoperability of crypto, and the general nature of financial services is that there is competition. Of course, there are people who, quote, own the customer and have a little bit more pricing power, but I think the trajectory of the space will be lower fees. And then the mission of anyone who cares about economics is to scale up alongside that. And some won't and some will.
And agents only accelerate that.
Right, that's a great point.
Right? Like they're going to go find the cheapest, lowest cost, most efficient way to do things. So that's going to be one of those forcing functions.
And less likely to be a captured customer because they don't care about the inertia of opening a new account. The same way that you would conventionally think of some of the frictions of just human time and effort allowing people to be captured.
And they don't like our beautiful branding. Yeah. And they don't give a shit about, all the work that we put into those things. They want, they're going to optimize for whatever they've been told to optimize for, which is generally going to be cost and security.
Yeah. Few teams that have, it feels as if they found the efficient frontier. There's this three-headed dragon that seems to be brewing, which is this Hyperliquid Zcash near three-headed dragon. I'm just curious if you guys have a perspective on why we may have seen this cohort of assets really take charge of the market in the last, say, call it a month or so.
I mean, best description I heard of Hyperliquid was, it was like you took a bunch of engineers and you put them in a room and you told them to rebuild financial markets. Ignore regulation, ignore all the rules, all the things that Hunter and I are, the older people in the room, we grew up having to deal with these things, just forget all those things. And I think, I love what's happening there. It will run into a regulatory wall. It will, there's going to be some limitations on the adoption there, but it's exciting to see, innovation approaching in that way. Near for me, Intense was the thing that brought me in. That was the capability. I love Ilya's vision on AI and agents, but Intense was really the thing. When I saw that, I said, that is something really special and different. And it's the chain abstraction, the ability to sign transactions on other chains. That's such a powerful capability to have, to get rid of that boat anchor of crypto steals that I have and to be able to do everything just in near.com. And then, Zcash is just that theme of privacy. And I wrote about this for the Near Foundation board back in December, just the lack of privacy being a constraining function on institutional adoption in our space. Anytime you're making a payment, not just investing, I'm not just worried about people front-running me or watching what I'm doing. Anytime I'm making a payment, anytime I have value moving in and out of a wallet, it's discoverable. You've traded with OTC desks. The first time you trade with them, it's one kind of transaction. The second time, well, they know all your wallets and they know all the transactions. They could see a whole lot more about what's going on. So I think Zcash is a great example of the way in which privacy as a concept is so critical.
Do you guys know the Midwit meme? It's a normal distribution curve, and there's a Jedi and a frustrated person and a Neanderthal. Yeah. I think another thing that's no. I'm surrounded by two. Sitting in the middle. Yeah. I'm the frustrated, overthinking it. But the thing that I would just add, I think what you said is correct. The other thing I'd just say is something that those three have in common is they have smart, capable ecosystems and teams around them, and there's no force more powerful than being on the right side of a structural trend, and each of them is in a lane where they're at the forefront of a wave that is forceful and cresting, and that's a very powerful force. So I think being in the right position to do something that the world thinks is useful is true of all three and is important to the success of any asset or any network. And so I think that's also a theme for those.
Yeah, they all feel very fundamentally part of this agentic movement of liquidity on-chain, liquidity, efficiency, privacy, and agency with all these agents. Guys, thanks so much for this panel. It's really, really fun. Not the first time, hopefully not the last. And we're going to keep things rolling here at Near Miami. Give it up for our panelists.
Thanks, Robbie.
Hunter and Matt.